MD Investor, the channel where we're talking about personal finance, setting goals, achieving goals, educating ourselves and our children so we can break the cycle of generational poverty. If this is your first time to the channel, welcome. This is what we do. We talk about personal finance and try to break the cycle. Before we get into it, guys, you can subscribe on YouTube at MD Investor and on Instagram at MD Investor One. I also post to Facebook. But even if you watch the video on Facebook, do me a favor and go to the channel on YouTube and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you'll be notified when new content comes out. So without further ado, let's get into the topic for today, dividend yield. So you go to different websites, Seeking Alpha, Yahoo Invest, or Yahoo Finance, and they'll talk about dividend yield. It's an important topic. So what we're going to talk about in this video is, what is the dividend yield? What do they tell you? Some of the different factors affecting the dividend yield, some reasons to be cautious, and give a couple of real-life examples. Dividend yield. What is it? The dividend yield simply is how much money per year in dividends you're being paid by this company divided by the share price. Simple. That's it. How much money in dividends annually you're getting divided by the share price. So it is a ratio, okay? So an example would be you're getting $1 per year, and usually companies pay quarterly, so it'd be 25 cents per quarter. So $1 a year divided by the share price. So the share price is $100. So 1 over 100, the dividend yield would be 1%. That's it, okay? Simply as that. What does the dividend yield tell you? Like I said, it basically tells you how much money you'll make per $100 invested, right? So if you're making $5 every year and the stock is trading at $100 per share, 5 divided by 100 is 5%. So that company would say have a dividend yield of 5%. And the reason why the dividend yield is helpful, if you have two different companies, company A and company B, one of them is paying $5 in dividends per year. One is paying $3 in dividends per year. One is paying $8. Like how do we compare, right? We use the dividend yield, okay? Because then you will take the numerator or the dividends annually divided by the price, and you'll get a percentage. That's how you're able to compare. Am I going to make more money with this company versus this company? Okay, so it's a way to compare dividends from different companies, and you talk about low yielder or high yielder, and that's how you can compare apples to apples, almost like the PE ratio, right? When we say from a previous video, which company is a better deal? This one is trading at $100. This one is trading at $500. We look at the PE ratio, okay? So ratio is the way to really compare apples to apples. So look at some of the factors affecting the dividend yield. We said the dividend yield is a ratio, right? It is the annual dividends divided by the share price. So it's a ratio, and there's two components. You have the numerator, which is the annual dividend, and the denominator, which is the share price. So the dividend yield can be affected by both components of the ratio. Okay? Now let's think about this. Let's first look at factors that can decrease the dividend yield. Factors that can decrease the dividend yield. Let's use an example, okay? Let's say we have a company and they're paying, let's use simple numbers, $1 in dividend annually. And the share price is $100. So they're paying $1 in dividend annually, so maybe 25 cents per quarter or 4 times a year, a total of $1 per year divided by $100. The dividend yield would be 1%. Okay, that'd be a pretty low dividend, but still, the numbers are easy and simple to understand. That dividend yield would be 1%. Now let's look at factors that can decrease the dividend yield. Okay, if the share price goes up or the share price increases, right? So now we said the share price is $100. Say the share price increased to $200 and the annual dividend remained the same. So $1 in dividend annually, and now the share price, instead of 100, it's now 200. So your dividend yield now, instead of being 1%, 1 over 100, is now 1 over 200. Now it is 0.5 or half a percent. Okay? So if the share price or the denominator goes up or increases, your dividend yield will go down. The other factor that you can change would be if you decrease the annual dividend. So the annual dividends go down, right? Instead of you getting $1 per year, so you're getting 50 cents. Okay? And then say the share price remained the same of 100. So instead of 1 over 100, it's now 0.5 over 100. And again, the dividend yield is going to go down to 0.5%. Okay? So factors that can decrease the dividend yield would be either increase in the share price or decrease in the dividend. Okay? So they're going opposite direction. Okay? Factors that can increase the dividend yield, and this is important. Factors that can increase the dividend yield, it's going to be the exact opposite of what we just said. Factors that can increase the dividend yield. So think again. Our annual, let's go back to our example. Our annual dividend is $1 and our share price is 100. So factors that can increase the dividend yield. If our share price goes down, right? The denominator is dropping or decreasing. Share price goes down, so instead of $100, it's now $50. Okay? So instead of 1 over 100 or 1%, it is now 1 over 50 or 2%. So the dividend yield can increase if you decrease the share price. And we'll talk about that later. And the dividend yield can also increase if you increase the annual dividends, okay? So they're going in opposite direction, okay? So the dividend yield can increase by lowering the share price or increasing the annual dividends, okay? We're gonna get back to that, okay? Let's talk about reasons to be cautious, okay? There's something called a yield trap, and as dividend investors, we have to look out for that. There's something called a yield trap. Let me add this. The average dividend yield for the S&P 500 is about 1.73%, so under 2%. So the S&P 500, as you already know, are the 500 biggest companies in America. Some pay dividends, some don't, right? Some of the big growth companies that we all know, Netflix, Facebook, Amazon, Google, all of them pay no dividends. So there's some companies that pay no dividend, and then you have other companies that pay a low dividend, some pay the medium, some pay a high dividend, but all together, aggregated, you get a cumulative dividend yield of about 1.73%. That's the S&P 500. So if you have an S&P 500 index fund where you hold the whole market or the 500 biggest companies, your yield is going to be about 1.73%. There are companies out there that have lower yield, right? 1%. There's companies that have higher yield, 7, 8, 9, 10%. But let's focus on this yield trap. We said there are a couple of things that can increase the dividend yield. One of them is to lower the share price when the share price is dropping and assuming the dividend remains constant, then the dividend yield is going to go up. The other thing that can increase the dividend yield is to increase the annual dividend payout and maintain the share price the same. The yield trap is when you see an extremely high dividend yield, right? So imagine the S&P 500 dividend yield is 1.7%, right? And now you're seeing so essentially you get $1, you get $1.70 for every $100 invested. I'm not going to go get rich about it. But what if you see a dividend yield of 10, 11, double digits, 12, 13, 14, 15% dividend yield? Now you'll get $15 in case the dividend yield is 15%. You get $15 for every $15 for every $100 you invest. That your eyes are going to open up. You can say, wow, I'd rather invest in that. You got to be cautious. The reason why you got to be cautious is that dividend yield could be that high because the share price is dropping. The share price could be dropping, and that's why the dividend yield is so high. Okay, especially when you start doing your research, right, and start looking quarter over quarter. Well, last quarter or last year, the dividend yield was only 3%. Now, and it went up to 5%, and now 8%, now 12%, now 13%. The share price could be dropping. We recently saw that in the examples of Carnival Cruise Line and Boeing because of the pandemic, right? Because the share price were dropping, and we say it's the ratio. So they were taking the annual dividend that the company was paying, which they pay basically 4 times a year. So they'll say, okay, the annual dividend has been whatever, $2, and now the share price was $50, which would give you a yield of 4%. But when the share price keeps dropping to $40, $30, now you're getting 6%, 8%, 10%. So you have to be leery of extremely high dividend yield. It could be the share price is dropping. And if the share price is dropping, the question you have to ask yourself is, why? Why is the share price dropping? Is there is the entire market dropping? Because in the case of, say you have a pandemic, or is it specific to this company? Maybe in the case of Carnival Cruise Line, people started getting nervous, after the pandemic. There's stay-at-home restriction. There's not going to be any more travel. So the share price was dropping, and eventually what happened? They cut the dividend for both Carnival Cruise Line and Boeing. So right before they cut it, the dividend yield was going up, and the reason was because of the share price dropping, and the reason why the share price was dropping was because of the pandemic. So if you're just a person going out looking, the share price the dividend yield is going up, I'm going to buy, not asking yourself the question, why? You can be caught. Okay? So some of the reasons to be cautious. Now let's look into a couple of examples, and then we should be done. Okay, let's go back to this is my Seeking Alpha portfolio. We'll look at 3 examples. Okay, we'll look at 3 examples. Let's go to Microsoft. Microsoft, ticker symbol MSFT, trading at $210.08. Let's go to the dividends. And they pay 56 cents per quarter. And annually, they pay $2.24. So you basically take this, 56 cents, and then you multiply, because it's quarterly, you multiply by 4, and you get an annual payout of $2.24. And you take this annual dividend and divide it by the share price, which is $210.08, and you get about 1%. So a little over 1%, 1.07%. And just to mention too, the dividend yield will fluctuate slightly. Why? Because the share price kind of fluctuates slightly, right? Like today it's $210.08. Tomorrow it may be $210.15. So there's a little fluctuation, but for the most part, it's going to be pretty similar. 1% essentially. So for every $100 you invest in Microsoft, you're going to make about $1. Okay? Maybe $1.07. So nothing to write home about. So this is what you call a low yielder. But the growth rate is there, 10%, okay? But now we'll just focus on the dividend yield. So that was Microsoft, and that was a low yielder. Let's look at something a little more closer, or like an average, closer to the S&P 500. So maybe something about 2% or so. You look at something like Johnson & Johnson, J&J. Johnson & Johnson, trading about $143.97. Paid $1.01, paid it quarterly. So for the year, annually, paid about $4.04. The share price is about $143.97. Divide the annual dividend payout by the share price, you get about 2.81%. Okay, so you see much higher than the Microsoft, right? That was about 1%. Okay, so that's how you're able to compare apples to apples. Otherwise, you'd be comparing Microsoft 56 cents to Johnson & Johnson $1.01. You say, oh, well, this is obviously more dividend. Yeah, but you have to look at the dividend yield. So the dividend yield we get about 2.81%, which is much higher than Microsoft, which is about 1%. So that's how you're able to kind of compare. Now let's look at a really high yield, a high yielder. Let's look at something that's a very high yielder. We can look at, let's look at AT&T. AT&T is a very high yielder. Ticker symbol T, AT&T, trading at $27.38. The dividends, it pays 52 cents, it pays it quarterly, and annually, you take 52 cents times 4, you get $2.08 divided by the share price of $27.38, and you get a dividend yield of over 7%, 7.60%. Obviously, the growth rate is not that much, it's slower. But the take-home message is, I just showed you 3 different ranges, right? I showed you Microsoft, which is a very low yielder, about 1%. I showed you kind of a medium dividend yield in Johnson & Johnson. Then I show you a high dividend yield of AT&T, over 7%. Now you compare apples to apples. For every $100 you invest in Microsoft, you're gonna make about $1.07. For every $100 you invest in Johnson & Johnson, you're gonna make about $2.81, because that's the dividend yield, 2.81. So you make about $2.80. For every $100 you invest in AT&T, you're gonna make $7.60. So that's how you can compare apples to apples. Obviously, you have to take other things into consideration, but for this video, we're just focusing on the dividend yield. So, just guys, remember, it's only one factor to look at, but I think now I hope you have an idea that the dividend yield is a much better tool to look at than the absolute dividend, right? Because the company's paying 52 cents. Like, oh, is that good? Is that better than this company that's paying 18 cents? Well, it depends on the dividend yield. So just guys, remember to let people know. If there's people that you think could benefit from this personal finance information, let them know about it in the investor. And whether you watch the video on Facebook or Instagram, still go to the YouTube channel and subscribe and hit the notification bell. You'll be notified when new content comes out. And just remember, guys, the past is gone. We can do nothing but learn from it. The present is here. It's time for us to plant seeds so we can have an abundant harvest for all our hard work under the sun, which God has promised us. And until then, guys, to continue to command your money to grow. And I will see you on the next one.